Today I want to talk about pixels and how to resize your photos. Okay, so probably in my class and teaching, a lot of times students are confused about pixel size and outputting images for different uses. Generally, when you output an image, you're going to have a different size image for the web as compared to a different size image for what you're printing. And how big of a print you make is going to be a different size image also. But before we can get into that, let's talk a little bit about image size when it comes from the camera. Now, when you're buying a camera, you always see megapixels. And megapixels just means how many pixels are in the sensor to capture the image. So obviously, the more pixels, the better the resolution of image that camera captures. So like for example here, I have three photos here. And this first one here in Zion, you can see over here that when we look at it, this is from an EOS 60. And the dimension is 3,648 by 5,472. So when we multiply those two together, that gives us our megapixels. And the amount ends up being 19,961,856, which is about a 20 megapixel size image. Now, this is a full frame sensor. Now, a full frame sensor is a little bit larger than a crop sensor. So Canon's 7D Mark II, which is this next picture next to it of my dog here, this is from the Canon 7D Mark II, and this is on a crop sensor, newer technology. So they're able to put the pixels a little bit closer together. And so this one ends up with the exact same numbers, 5,472 by 3,648. So you end up with, again, a 20 megapixel sensor. Now, this older 5D Mark II here is a full frame sensor, but it has more megapixels. And we look at it, we have 5,616 by 3,744, which roughly gives us a 21 megapixel sensor. A little bit over, a tiny bit over, but that's about what we have. So in Lightroom, we can export the images and we can change the size of the images when we export them, because Lightroom deals with just raw images. It deals with all the information there. And it doesn't compress it down into another format until we export it. So if I go over to my export button here down at the bottom left here, and I click on it, we get this little settings menu up. Now when this comes up, I have a bunch of different things I can do here. And I'm going to reduce some of these down because we don't need these for this video here. So we got export location where we're going to export it, but we have file settings. We have original, we have a JPEG that we can export it as a TIFF, a PNG, a DNG. So we're going to go with JPEG because we can export it at different sizes on JPEG. And once we do that, we see that our file settings change. We have JPEG here, and then we have color space that we can use. And I'm not going to get into color space right now, but sRGB is good for the web. Adobe RGB or Pro Photo RGB is good for printing, at least in my experience. Quality over here just means that as we bring this up or down, we're going to change the quality of the image. It's basically going to change the size of the image and how much information is put into the image when it exports it. So over here we have a couple different interesting things here, and I'm going to reduce these just so we can concentrate on this one right here, the image size. So when I click it to resize to fit, I have some options here. I have width and height that I can change it to. I have dimensions. I have the long end that I can make a certain number of pixels or inches. I have the short end that I can make a certain number. I can export it out as megapixels, how many megapixels I want, and a percentage size of what the original size is. So let's just go dimensions here. And so I have both dimensions here on pixels that I can put in here, or I can change them to inches if I want. So right now, my image can be a 13 by 11 size image. And that's at a resolution of 72. Now, I want it to be 72 when it goes out towards the web. I want it to be a lower resolution because 72 pixels per inch is roughly what our monitors can display. They're not going to display much higher. A 4K display is going to be a little bit higher, so you can go a little bigger on 4K display. But most of the monitors, the 1080 monitors, 1080p monitors, they're going to be displaying at 72 pixels per inch. So right now it's resized to fit 11 by 13 at 72 dpi. If I wanted to export it for printing, I would want that to be 300 dpi. And if I did that, I probably want to change this over here to the size that I want the actual output to be. So I want it to be roughly an 8 by 10, so I'm going to put 8 here and 10 inches here. And so now when it exports that image, it's going to be, the physical size of the image is going to be 8 inches by 10 inches and export at 300 dpi resolution. If I wanted this to go on the web, and let's say I wanted it to be a header for the top of my web page, I'd probably change it to the long end, and I'd probably change this to pixels, back to pixels, and maybe 1500 pixels across. You could go more. You could, figure out exactly what the number is, but 1500 pixels across, and I change this to 72 pixels per inch, and that way it's a much smaller image, but it's going to load up much faster on my web. Now, the reason I'm going through this is that when you export these images or change the size of them, it really depends on where you're going to put them. And what we'll do is we'll take this, I'm going to cancel out of this, and we're going to take this image on over to Photoshop. And I actually do have the image already loaded into Photoshop just to save us some time here. So this image here, let me get that back to center. I don't know why I moved that. So if I go up to image and I go down to image size here, we can see that our original size here, the width, and let me change this to inches here so that we can see that. All right, let's go to pixels. So we see our pixels. So you can see that these are the exact same pixel dimensions that I talked about before. That's the size of that the image is, the physical size. So when the camera took this picture, it made it that particular size. It had a 240 resolution, 240 pixels per inch resolution. So if you want to see the actual size of the image, we can change this on over to inches. And you see that it's inside the camera, it's taken a 15 inch tall, a little bit, almost 16 inch tall, by a 23.5 inch wide picture at 240 resolution. Now, in Photoshop, when we have resampling on, what that means is that you can change the size and width and keep the resolution at whatever you want. And if it doesn't have enough pixels to fill it in, you can actually add pixels to it. And it tells you how you want to add those pixels. Now, anytime we do that, we're degrading the image because we're taking whatever pixels that we had, we're adding to them, so we're not using the original pictures. Or, I'm sorry, original pixels. I said picture. Now, if we take the resample off, you notice that all three of these numbers are locked in now. So if I change one, I change them all. So if I change this to 72 dpi, you see that I have a 78 inch by 52 inch picture. Because what it did was it took all those pixels and it expanded them out to 72 inches or 72 dots per inch across instead of 300 dots per inch. So now it made that image physically larger. So if I change the resolution back to 300, you see that we have enough information here to make it 12.5 by almost 19 inch picture at 300 pixels per inch, which is going to give us good resolution on the printing. So when you export them out, depending on what you need it for, most of the time if we need it for the web, we want to really have the resampling on, because if we change this to 72 dpi, we still have the same amount of information. The file is exactly the same size. It's going to go export out, and then if we put it up on our website, it's going to load very slowly because it's a very large file. So we really want that file smaller. So in this case, we want to resample it down. So when we click on that, we're going to resample it down. And now only the width and height is locked together. So what that means is that when I reduce this image size, it's going to stay proportionally exactly the same because these two are locked together. So now if I make it like a 7 inch by 4 inch image at 72 dpi, it's going to throw out some pixels because it's making a really small image. It's not going to take all of those pixels and press them together. It's going to get rid of some of them because we only want 72 pixels across. We don't want all of them across when we make it down that small of an image. And plus it decreases the size of the image so that when we put it up on the web, it's a very small size image and it pops up rather quickly. So this is basically how you resize images in both Photoshop and Lightroom. It all depends on what you want it for. Now, people think that, you know, if you take an image off the web, you can print that. Well, you can't, because see, it's a very small image here. It has very little amount of detail or pixels in it to print well. So when you print it, it's going to print at 72 dots per inch, when it should be 300 dots per inch to give you the maximum benefit of the printer. Hopefully, you know, that gives you some idea on how to resize your images. So for example, let's go ahead and press OK on this. Okay, so as you can see, when I reduce it down to 72 dpi, and again, let me just go ahead and open up the image size here. You can see that we have it at 72 dpi, and it's reduced down quite small. So it's a rather small image. Now, when we compare that to our original image that we brought in, and again, here I will go, and I'm sorry that those can't stay up there as I switch back and forth. Or maybe, no, they won't. So you can see that it's a much larger image, and it has more information in it. So I'm going to keep this, the large image, and I'm going to have this one, the small image here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to export that out. I'm going to go ahead and save as, and I'm going to save this as a TIFF, as a full-size TIFF here, and we'll save the other one as a TIFF, and we'll see the difference between the two. So I'm going to go ahead and put them up on my desktop here. Or actually, I think I will put them in, I'll put them over in Pictures and New Folder, and I'm going to put that size and create that and go ahead and save that. And so what that's going to do is that's going to save that image. We're not worried about this too much. We just want to see the size of the image. And then I'm going to come over to this image too, and I'm going to tell it to save as. And we're going to keep that one as a TIFF also, and small. We'll put that one as small. And I'm going to go over to my pictures and into my folder here. And I'm going to save that over into that folder. Okay, so I'm in my folder now, and I click on this TIFF folder here, and I see that so I click on this picture here, and this was our larger image that we saved, and you see that it's 126.2 megabytes, so it's a rather large file. So this has a lot of detail in it, and again, this was the image, and let me just move this out of the way here. This was this image here. And again, this was this image, which has a physical size of 15.6 inches by 23.4 inches and 240 dots per inch. So on the other one, let me just escape out of this. On the smaller one that we went ahead and saved, we have, it's 4 inches by 7 inches, or a little over 4.5 inches by 7 inches at 72 dots per inch resolution. So when I bring that back on over here and we look at the small TIFF here, you see that that's a 1 megabyte TIFF. So you see there's a big difference. There's, what? 125.2 megabyte difference between the larger file and the smaller file. So again, exporting them out, in this case, this TIFF right here, and generally I'd export it as JPEG, but I didn't want to do that because a JPEG does do additional processing to it where the TIFF doesn't do as much. But if I wanted to print, I would want to print this TIFF here, the larger one, because that would be a good printing one because that's 260 dots per inch across. Whereas the small one here, this is the one that I'd much rather use on the web because it's only 1 megabyte. So hopefully that helps you understand a little bit about image size, how they're captured by the camera, what the megapixels mean on the camera, you know, how large the image is, what you can do with that, how you can downsize it using the image or the pixels that you have, or adjust their sizes by keeping the same number of pixels in the image, and how to output them to use them where you want them, whether they're going to be on the web or printing. So if you like that, please do subscribe to the channel. Thanks for being here and watching.